فكلي واشربي وقري عينا فإما ترين من البشر أحدا فقولي إني نذرت للرحمن صوما.
Hey everyone, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Islamic Married Podcast. So for today, I want to talk about a Quranic and biblical figure, that of Sulyaman. So as I mentioned before, I am writing my second edition to my book, The Quran, the Bible, Biblical Figures in the Islamic Tradition. And it's been amazing to go back through that book, written almost 7 years ago, and see what we wrote, but at the same time, look at new scholarship, see what has been written, what can inform our entries, and what could create more interesting discussions and dialogues within classes, communities, and study circles. So one of the figures in the book is that of Sulyman or Sulayman. And in the biblical tradition, Sulyman is seen as a wise figure. He's seen as someone who has power, wisdom, and he's someone that judges with justice. Now, in the Qur'an, as we look closely at some of the verses, we see that Sulayman is someone that's seen to have power, but also at the same time, humility. And there's this one story that strikes me every time, one of my favorite stories in the Qur'an, is this encounter that he has with this ant. And I think this story speaks about the importance of humility while having power, but also the importance of communicating and being in touch with your surroundings and other creations, such as animals. So the story begins where Sulayman, he's leading an army, and they're going across a valley of ants. And the Arabic says, Hatta idha ataw ala wadin naman. So they're coming along and they're marching, and they come to this valley of ants. And then one of the ants sees this army approaching and says, Qalat namla ya ayyuhan namal. So they say, so this one ant starts to speak. And this is one of the things I love about the story of Sulayman in the Quran, is that the animals are speaking. In many ways, they're also speaking with other human beings. So there's this connection. In the modern world, sometimes we have this idea that humans, man is different and superior to other creations, and that there's this distinct border between them. But here we see that the ant is speaking to other ants, to their species, but then the words of this ant is heard to human beings. So this ant is saying to the other ants, it says, enter into your homes. لا يحطمنكم سليمان وجنوده وهم لا يشعرون. So the ant is saying, you better go and hide and get into your houses, because Sulyman and his armies may crush you, and they may not realize, they may not be aware. Now, there's a couple of things here that is profound. So the first one is that the Quran is preserving this idea that animals speak to each other. So oftentimes we think of speech as that of humans, that humans are better than animals. We're a distinct creature and species because we have the ability to write and to communicate. And this is also found in the Quran, that the Quran mentions the idea that you can recite Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, so recite in the name of your Lord, and the idea that allama bil qalam, that God taught people how to write. And even in other verses in the Quran, it mentions Nun wal qalami wa ma yasturun. So the Quran swears by the idea of the pen and what's able to compose. And also we see this idea of bayan appear. So God, allamahul bayan, he teaches that of speech or expression, that humans are unique and special because they have the ability to write, to communicate. They have the ability to express themselves in narratives and poetry. But we see here that animals also have the ability to communicate. So yes, we are special as humans. We do have the ability to compose and articulate our thoughts, but other animals, other creations have that ability as well. And here, an ant is saying to guard yourselves, giving an order that if you do not do this, you will be crushed. And then at the end is a fascinating phrase, وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ, that this army may not realize. So it's not intentional. So this ant's almost giving an excuse that Sulayman and his army may come, but they may hurt you not because they want to necessarily, but because they're on this mission, they're marching, and they may not see you. So the next verse is profound in the sense that Sulyman hears the ant. So Sulyman in the Qur'an has this unique ability to talk to animals, and the animals can talk to him. So he hears what this ant is saying, and it says, فَتَبَسَّمَ ضَاحِكًا. So he begins to smile and begins at the same time to laugh. So this is a nice, beautiful phrase that in Arabic, the idea of tabassum or ibtisam is to smile, but at the same time to laugh out loud, ضاحكة. So this is you can imagine it, right? That he begins to smile a little bit and then laughs. Min qawliha, from her words, because he hears that this ant is in a state of fear, worrying about herself as well as her tribe. And then he makes this remarkable prayer, and he says, وَقَالَ رَبِّ أَوْزِعْنِي أَنْ أَشْكُرَ نِعْمَتَكَ الَّتِي أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيَّ. So he says here that, oh God, I wish that you inspire me to always be thankful for the favors which you have blessed me and my parents with. وَعَلَى وَالِدَيْ. So what's important here is that Sulayman, in this state of power, he could have become drunk, right? He could have said, wow, look how much power I have. These little ants are scared of me. I'm going to destroy them, right? I could walk all over them. I could demolish their home. But this is a moment of reflection and humility. And he asked God to give him the ability to be grateful, to have shukr. And of what? Of ni'mah, of the blessings that God has given him. So now he is realizing that God has given him power and dominion over the earth. He's given him an army. And now this ant is scared of him. And this is a moment that he needs to demonstrate gratitude, not only for the blessings that he's been given, but they've been given on his parents. And as you know, his parents would be that of Dawood or David. And وَأَنْ أَعْمَلَ صَالِحًا تَرْضَى. And then he acts in a righteous manner that is pleasing to God. وَأَدْخِلْنِي بِرَحْمَتِكَ فِي عِبَادِكَ الصَّالِحِينَ. And then you enter me with your mercy in your service among the righteous servants. So what's important here is that Sulayman, he has this eureka moment, this moment where he is aware of his power and his authority, but then this makes him think about the past, right? That he's grateful for all the blessings that have been given upon him. He begins to think about his two parents, and then it moves to that of the future, where he's thinking that I need to act in a righteous way, I need to act in a way that's pleasing to God, and that I eventually want to be entered with God's mercy among the righteous servants in heaven. Now, this particular prayer is important, and it speaks to a larger theme we see in modern Quranic scholarship. So there's this amazing book by Sarah Tilili called Animals in the Qur'an. And one of the things she talks about in this book is the importance of understanding the Quranic worldview of nature. So oftentimes, as we discuss, there is this idea in the modern world of man versus nature. But she argues that if you look closely at the Quran, specifically that of animals, you see that animals are another creation of God, just like human beings. So humans should not necessarily see them as against nature, but rather humans need to act in a way that's similar to other creations, whether that be the sun, the moon, the stars, or animals such as ants and cattle. And this is important because oftentimes we understand ourselves in the world as special and distinct, and that gives us certain rights and privileges. Because humans are better, we get to exploit the earth. Because we are superior, we begin to consume it in unsustainable ways. And this is an argument that we make in terms of climate change. Climate change is real and it's happening. And we see that humans are using the earth in ways that are exploitative and ways that are not sustainable. So where does this idea come from where humans can just destroy, use anything they want at any moment, eat whatever they desire, and really butcher the earth without any contemplation or reflection? So part of her work is arguing that humans have to engage in sujud, right? So you think about the idea of prostration, that just like the sun and the moon and the stars and animals are worshiping God, that they're going about their paths in the world and their paths in their daily lives, humans need to do the same thing. And they need to be reflective of the world around them. When they see the sunrise, when they see the moon, when they see the stars twinkle, when they see the birds flapping their wings, all these are signs of God. And all of these things are reminders for people to worship God and to be aligned with that of the universe. And one of the verses she cites in her argument is the idea that animals are similar to that of human beings. And it says, وَمَا مِن دَابَةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا طَائِرٌ يُطِيرُ بِجَنَاحَيْهِ إِلَّا أُمَمٌ أَمْثَالُكُمْ. So this is a remarkable phrase, and it says that all the creatures that crawl on the earth and those that fly with their wings are communities like yourselves. So this is fascinating in that this verse is saying that anything on the earth, so think about those who walk or crawl, any cattle, any sheep, any horses, these are all things that have family, that have community. And anything that flies, think of birds, they have communities, amthadakum. So they have a ummah, right, or a nation. And once again, this is, I think, heart of movements towards sustainability and conservation, is that when you look at other animals or other creations, you actually empathize with them. You see yourself within them. And one of the things I love doing with my kids and with my family is watching documentaries, and specifically animal documentaries. And one of the things that you do when you watch these documentaries, you say, oh my God, these animals are like us, right? They have families, they have partners, they have spouses, they have feelings, they communicate, they have kids, right? They have even hopes and dreams, right? They play, they have fun. So when you start watching or looking at these creations as like yourselves, then you begin to be more sympathetic with it and want to form even a relationship with them. And I think this has profound implications, because if we understand creation around us as similar to ourselves, that they have families and they have communities and they have language and dialogue, then we're more inclined to protect them and sustain them. So in conclusion, we see that the figure of Sulayman in the Qur'an is that of power. So in the biblical tradition, he is one of wisdom and he is one of kingdom. But one of the things that emphasized in the Qur'an with Sulayman is this idea of power, and that he uses that power in a righteous way. So the story of the ant, in many ways, is a story of him realizing his power and being grateful of it, recognizing the bounties and mercy of his Lord, and also at the same time realizing that he needs to act in a righteous way. And I think this contrast between Sulayman and his army and that of the ant, because the ant is a small creature, a creature that we may take for granted, we may not always see, but there is this emphasis in the Quran that they have a community, they have feelings, they communicate, they talk to one another, and they have concern. And Sulayman sees that, he hears it, and then he acts in a righteous way. We also see the importance of animals. So one of the important aspects of animals in the Quran is that they communicate, they talk. So Sulayman, and later in the same chapter, he will start speaking with the hudhud, the hoopy bird, and who goes and flies and sees that there is this woman, Bilqis, in the Islamic tradition, who is worshiping the sun, and that Sulayman needs to perform da'wah. He needs to proselytize and invite her to the true faith. So this connection between animals and that of human beings, we see this, for example, in the story of Yunus, Jonah, and the whale, where the whale eventually swallows Jonah, but then will throw him up onto the land because of God's orders. We see this also in the chapter of Surah Al-Fil, or that the elephants were charging on Mecca and the Kaaba, but then God told them to rest and to stop, and then they did not move forward. So there's this idea that the animals are a sign of God, that they are creations of God, and that they have communities. And these communities are similar to that of human beings. And that's why we need to respect those animals and also see them as signs pointing to God. And lastly, I think in the story of Sulayman is the idea of gratitude, of shukr, and being grateful to your parents, your origins, where you come from. But also this gratitude translates into the idea of a righteous life. So Sulayman is someone who is powerful, but the story or the moral of the encounter is the idea that if you have power, that power in itself is not necessarily bad, but if you have that, then you need to be grateful. And that gratitude is not simply about saying thank you or saying, I really appreciate that, but it's also using that power towards righteous ends and acting in a moral and ethical way. So thanks once again for listening to the Islamic Mary podcast. I will encourage you to order my book, The Islamic Mary. I'm really excited and happy to see that it reached the Fortress Press best-selling list, and it seems to be a popular book, especially in the holiday season. People are giving it out as gifts and sharing it with those that they care about and love. I would encourage you to subscribe to this podcast. Seeing the numbers grow over the last year has been super encouraging. Also want to encourage your friends, students, and colleagues to listen to the podcast. If you found this valuable, you can always share it with your network. I had some of my professor friends who've been sharing it with their students and incorporating it within their syllabus and their courses. Also, you can review this podcast. It helps other people find this podcast. It encourages them to listen to it. And you can visit my website and join my newsletter, where you can learn more about the various events and programs related to the Islamic Mary publication and release. Thanks once again, and take care.